Welcome to this episode of Life Science Success. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Don, and I'm a digital marketer in life sciences. And let me just bring in our guest for today. So, Victoria Donovan is the founder and CEO of Clinically Media, an award-winning agency that is transforming patient recruitment and retention strategies in clinical research. So, with that, welcome, Victoria.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you on. And I mean, it's great to just in general be connected with you. I know the first time I ran into you was at Bio in Boston two sessions ago. So not the
At
latest Bio in Boston.
Margaritaville of all places.
Right. And then beyond that, we're local to Colorado together. So, you put together really nice social events here. And so I'm hoping we get to dive into your story, your background, clinically media. And why don't we just start with what is it that made you interested in life sciences, and, what made you interested in the area of life sciences that you're currently in?
Yeah, so I started my career as a consultant, which is crazy to go back and think about. I was working freelance for all kind of companies doing marketing and social media and content marketing and a lot of graphic design. I've always liked that. And I got a gig at a biotech creating a like instructional sheet for like for research sites to use to execute on the protocol, and did a good enough job that I got hired back to do, it was for the phase 1 study. I got hired back to do the phase 2 study instructional materials, which were even bigger and better. And um, eventually they asked me if I knew how to do patient recruitment, and I've always said yes, of course I know how to do patient recruitment. And then I look back and I did know how to do it because I knew how to find people digitally for different products and services, and was able to apply all that to patient recruitment for clinical research studies, and really grew the business from there. So the life sciences found me in that way. But my I come from a family of doctors and scientists, so there was a natural fit as well.
Oh, very good. And then let's talk a little bit more about your journey. So you said consulting, and then you eventually wind up, at Clinically Media. So what is it that made you go, hey, look, I want to start my own company from consulting?
Yeah, so I was young and bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and had a little more business than I could handle on my own as a consultant. So founded Clinically Media, and then, within a year after that, I really decided I was going to grow it, and really turn this into an agency, and hired people full time, and really leaned into it, and learned the space, and it's been a roller coaster from there. But the fact is, if I look back and like, why did you decide to do this? Running a business is really hard, and I look back, and if I knew everything I know now, I probably wouldn't have done it. But I'm very thankful I didn't, because I went into it just full force, full of energy, and we're it's like 8 years later now, so it's been quite a while.
Well, I mean, congratulations, first of all, and it's not an easy journey. I can attest to that. And you have to in a lot of cases, I feel like, figure out where you're going to go, and then also it's almost like know the direction, but also, build the path as well. Like do both at the same
Totally,
time.
totally, like
So
building the rocket ship while you're flying it.
yes,
And building it
absolutely.
wrong half the time too, that's part of the fun in it. And you look back, it looks very linear, but as you're going through the building of the rocket ship, it's you kind of feel like you're shooting in the dark half the time, and then a few things land, and you follow those wins and build upon those, and before you know it, it's been 8 years, and you have some success under your belt.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about Clinically Media. D- could you tell me a little bit more about the mission and vision of the company?
So we are patient recruitment that is quality over quantity. There's a lot of patient recruitment providers, and a lot are really fantastic lead gen kind of companies that send a ton of patient referrals to their clients. What that turns into sometimes, though, is a ton of work for your clients or for the research sites you're providing patients for. So we have a quality focus in that we send fewer leads your way, but they're more qualified. And then we offer pre screening services, and we have a fantastic database of patients, which everyone says they have a fantastic database of patients. And of course, I'm biased that ours is extra fantastic. But there's magic that comes in having a fresh database of patients who is actually able to qualify for studies and is able to join them and has a positive experience in them. And so we're consistently trying to feed that positive experience. And the data shows that people are more likely to show up for their clinical research study like screening visits, and they're more likely to stay in a trial if they feel like somebody cares that they stay in it, which, you think about, and of course, people want to do things where other people care that they're there. But once that kind of data was revealed, we can lean into that completely and make patients feel like they're as important as they are. Really, in the life cycle of developing a drug or device, the patients participate in the clinical research trials are like, and just cannot be overstated how important of a role they play.
Yeah, absolutely. And find it's funny to me to think that you have kind of both. You have patients that need trials, but clearly there are trials that need patients. And sort of finding or pairing the two together, can't be a very easy role to play either.
It's not, and that point opens up an interesting can of worms, if you will, about different technologies that have come out in the past couple of years that match patients to EDC data. We've always done like chart review to try and find patients that are at our research sites already that may have not been identified. But there's a balance between collecting enough information from patients to get them qualified for a specific study and then collecting enough that we can identify patients for future studies. And it's all really self-reported, um, self-uploaded data. So and it takes certain compliance to be able to handle all that data and to measure it. And then balance that against the fact that, most campaigns, you're better off just ROI wise, almost starting from the beginning and running a campaign that targets a very specific population because you get people who are fresh, who haven't been in a trial before, who may have tried the 3 or 4 drugs that they need to have tried to be in a study, versus trying to find those like 5 or 6 people in your database of, a couple 100,000, or if you're looking at EDC data, millions, and there's um, really like there's some magic in finding what I call fresh patients.
Wow. And then what are some of the innovative approaches that clinically media uses to try and achieve the results?
Yeah, so most recently we've done some pretty cool things with AI where we take all of the data from ads that we've run in the past, identify what's worked, what hasn't worked, and then what ads actually contributed to not just referrals for the study, so not just like a pre qualified lead, but actually patients that ended up enrolling, and figuring out what creatives and what targeting demographics actually end up enrolling patients in studies, really down to specific geographic locations. And then taking all of that information and applying it to every single campaign that we do going forward, and then taking the data from that and feeding back into it. Another thing that's been pretty phenomenal in getting patients enrolled in studies and staying in studies and enrolling in future studies is community-based efforts. So going from digital into in person, and we just launched a community that's half virtual, half in person called Psychodelta, just specifically for psychedelic research studies. There's really cool research happening there, and kind of the perfect patient population who's really interested in participating in those studies. And so we're kind of piloting out how does that look if we get patients who are similar to each other together in person? Can we use the collaborative efforts that come from that, from research sites participating in that, from biotech sponsors participating in that, and from patients participating in that all together to create, I mean, not just get patients enrolled in studies, but how do we use that then to feed back into the life sciences and actually develop drugs and products and therapies that patients are looking for and that they need and want and are actually going to be successful in the marketplace when, if and when they get approved.
So I did get, I think yesterday, because I have several email addresses, I think I got 3 emails from you about psychedelta. So I, that's one of my favorite things about your business is that I feel like there's constantly, new communication that's coming out, and you constantly are telling people like this is what's happening, inside of clinically media. So for anybody that's not hasn't gone to the website, hasn't enrolled in their news, you should. Um, it's a good place to kind of watch what's going on.
Absolutely. And you can put in 3 email addresses too, and you'll get 3 emails as well.
As long as they're probably the separate, I would imagine they all have to be different, but and mine
Yeah.
were. It kind of matches my personality. I have 3, so okay. So how do you see clinically media's role evolving, in the broader clinical trial ecosystem, especially considering the challenges of patient recruitment and clinical research?
There's an interesting phenomenon that happens when CROs and patient recruitment companies get really big or really get kind of rolled up into some private equity, conglomerate, and the patient recruitment companies and the CROs kind of become brokers of patient recruitment companies like us and hire us all, but to recruit for the exact same studies, which is, from my view, and of course I'm biased because I have a patient recruitment company, but is really shooting yourself in the foot because there's then 10, 15, 20 patient recruitment companies all fighting for the exact same patients, typically in the digital space. And in the digital space, whoever can pay the most for a lead or for a sale wins. And there's a phenomenon of all of these patient recruitment companies driving up the cost for each other. And then we're fighting tooth and nail, all for the exact same patients. So we like to partner with CROs and really own the patient recruitment for, even if it's just for a particular indication or a particular study, and are able to offer patient recruitment at a lower cost because we're not competing and we're not having to spend the most to get the same patients that we're all looking for. So there's some pretty exciting partnerships with CROs that we have or that we're developing right now to become that sole provider. And I say to them, if there's like 3 or 4 patient recruitment companies that a CRO or a sponsor is looking for, don't give half the project to one and half the project to another, because you're going to end up spending like 2, 3 times as much money. And your enrollment timelines are going to get expanded because everyone's competing for the same patients, and you can only spend so much to get patients because you only get paid so much. And we're on a performance based model, which a lot of patient recruitment companies are, versus a more traditional kind of agency model where you have an ad budget you're working through. There's kind of an ultimate vision that we're not all competing for the exact same patients, and it'll ultimately increase the satisfaction that us as patients have, or that we as patients have in the healthcare system, because drugs will be less expensive, and you're going to get treated like the valuable kind of cog in the machine that you are, versus a you know pennies worth referral that just kind of gets passed between research studies until somebody can cash out on you.
Yeah, I mean, it is an interesting sort of world. I mean, you talked about your database, and we've had Ross Jackson, like long time ago, come on and talk about how he used Facebook ads to recruit people. I would imagine you're still doing a portion of that. You probably got a solid database of your own of people that you could reach out to. I'm just interested, how is the landscape evolved, and where do you see it going from here?
Yeah, so we absolutely still use social media ads. So, I mean, everything underneath the Meta umbrella. So that's Instagram, Facebook, and then they have a whole like ad network that's in online phone games and kind of similar to how Google's display network works, where if you go to a website and then they kind of follow you around the web and you look at a pair of shoes at Nordstrom and all of a sudden it's showing you these exact same shoes everywhere. There's Google ads that we use, so Google search ads. So if you type in psoriasis clinical trial in Denver, it would come up at the top. We have a big SEO ongoing campaign for all of our studies that's constantly running that actually has phenomenal ROI in terms of money spent and actual referrals that come through because you have very high intent patients that are coming looking for a clinical trial. They find it, they qualify, and just the percentage of people that actually fill out the form and end up enrolling in the study is very high. Beyond that, the in-person community efforts are super interesting to me. The partnerships with others who have databases. So patient advocacy groups, for example, can be super powerful. They can also be super expensive. So those are an interesting kind of long-term, almost PR play that you need to work with the patient advocacy groups because if the patient advocacy group doesn't know about your clinical trial, they're not going to know about your drug when it comes out. And by that point, it's kind of too late because people are going to be asking about, like, the patients are going to be asking the patient advocacy group what's going on. And then finally, we do a lot of job board postings. So
Hmm.
there's a few different job boards. And if you think about like, once we kind of cracked into that, it makes a ton of sense because you're looking for people who have the ability to come in. So job board postings and like gig board postings. So you're looking for people who don't necessarily have health insurance at the time, who have the time to come into a clinical trial because they don't have a standard 9 to 5 job. So the gig workers are great because the job, someone who's looking for a full time job may get a full time job and then they enroll in your study and 2 months down the line, they can't show up at 10 a.m. on a Tuesday anymore. Gig workers are phenomenal for clinical trial participants because they treat the clinical trial as another gig and they show up, they're great, that's a smaller return on patients that actually are interested in your study that end up enrolling just because of qualifiers because it's harder to target specific groups and specific demographics unlike you can on Facebook and Google. Where I see things going is there's always kind of a moving target in terms of what you're allowed to say on ads, how you're allowed to build your audience groups, especially when healthcare is related. So Facebook announced a couple weeks ago that that they're not going to use a lot of the audiences that we've created because they've, I presume, found out that they're somewhat healthcare related. And it's not that we're breaking any rules, but they were like, hey, in January, your ad audiences are going to disappear. So figure out something else that's going to work, which is very interesting to me because they've all been built through Facebook ads and it's all within their own platform. But the future is probably going to be more in the artificial intelligence and machine learning aspect of pulling data from EDCs and from other like big deep networks of patients and being able to advertise specifically to them like within that big database. And we have our own database too that we're constantly growing and are able to advertise to. There's also some super interesting stuff again in that kind of AI machine learning space where patient populations are being identified based off of bus routes, different genetic markers that have clusters around the US on where to put research sites that would
Hmm.
be, in theory, phenomenal because you have patients who are going to be able to like hop off the bus or hop off the train, go to the clinical trial, then go home, and commuter routes. So there's a couple partners that we've been talking to that we're working with that have like really cool technologies that are exploring these things and piloting them out, as well as databases of patients who opt in to have their information essentially sold. But when it's sold, they benefit from that and that they get like a monetary gain every time their information is accessed or their information is sold. And I think, combining all of those things together, we are going to free ourselves from Mark Zuckerberg's universe of Facebook, Instagram users, which is still a very phenomenal place to get or to run any kind of ads. But the different rules and regulations that are all in place. Like, as a consumer, as a patient, I love that they put these things in place. Makes our job harder, and it's a constant moving target. But the AI and machine learning in identifying where patients are is super interesting, and it's gonna bring healthcare to places a little bit more remote and a little bit off the beaten path than is currently happening, which also is going to improve patients enrolling in studies because you don't have this like completely depleted population, which we're seeing a little bit right now too. I mean, if we like, there's certain locations that just have an insane number of clinical trials happening, and they're really hard to recruit in because you have you're just competing first of all, but you have patients who've been in a lot of clinical trials and who you know, are not able to participate because they've been in another one in the past 6 months, or they've had this treatment or that treatment or this investigational treatment, and your pool gets smaller and smaller and smaller. So the tools to expand the pool that we pull from are super interesting to me.
Yeah. And I mean, just the ability as well to use AI to help shape some of the messaging as well has been, I mean, I've just seen it mature like over time, and I can only imagine. We don't do ads, so I don't. It's not an environment that I operate in at all. But at the same time, I could see how, again, AI could definitely help with, adjusting the wording in your ads to try and get the right people and match what that target, might be looking for as well.
Yeah, absolutely. There's really cool programmatic advertising as well that doesn't, in our cases, is it's really cool in that you basically upload a bunch of our approved language, and you tell it, like, hey, you have to use these specific phrases, you do have freedom in the imagery, and it creates these hundreds or thousands of different iterations and shows them to really like deep corners on the web where there's untapped patient populations, which is really good for creating awareness about something, not so good for converting patients necessarily. But yeah, I mean the use of AI to create creatives that convert is very cool because you can only A/B test so quickly, and before you know it, the study's over, and you've learned a little bit. But when you can blast out 1,000 at once and get a ton of information back very quickly, you're able to just move faster, and then all that translates too into what is going to work when the product is approved, or if the product is approved or device is approved in the actual commercial marketplace. So developing those relationships with the sponsors so that they can carry those learnings through. And it's a little different. People who participate in the clinical trial aren't always the same patient who's going to buy your product, but it's sure very helpful information for the bigger marketing team that's going to sell this drug.
Absolutely. So, as the CEO who's received industry recognition such as Pharma Voice 100 Top Industry Leaders in 2024 and PM 360 Elite Entrepreneur Award, what's the greatest piece of leadership advice that you've received?
Someone along the way told me that it was okay to be me and be a leader, and that I didn't need to fit into the kind of stereotype role of leader. And that freedom to be able to like be myself, to be able to kind of come as you are and lead your way has been a phenomenal like lift of energy that I've been able to then put into growing the business and into hiring the right people and having a team that works well together versus trying to fit into a box that I don't fit in. And I don't think many people do, but the stereotype exists. And of course, too, just having more experience and bringing all those experiences to the table allows you to come to things a little bit more confidently. But I don't know who told me that or if I read it somewhere along the way, but it's it's scary at first because you're like, well, this has worked with me trying to be this like, really type A and organized, wake up early kind of person, but it drains you and you don't have then the energy to make the 3 or 4 big decisions you need to make that day. So that's so cliche and much easier said than done, but be yourself and people
I
will follow.
I so I've only known you a few years now, right? And we've only had a few interactions throughout time, but I see you coloring outside the lines quite a bit. So that's kind of my analogy for keeping things in the boxes. Just I could see that I could see that being a natural struggle anyway for your personality. So I'm not that surprised, I guess, overall that would be your one of the things that you would hang on to. I also think though that to like break norms, to be a trendsetter, to do any of those things, you have to um you have to be somebody that's willing to sort of put yourself out there, and I see that routinely with you as well. So, yeah,
Well, thank you for acknowledging that. I love that.
you're welcome. So, Victoria, what inspires you?
Man, what inspires me? I am very driven to live a life that is fun and that I enjoy. Then tomorrow is not promised. And if you're consistently doing things you don't like to do and not having fun in your job, you're going to have an entire life that passes by without much joy in it. And I work a lot. I love working, but I've also created a role for myself that I enjoy and that I feel I can be myself in, and that highlights my strengths. And learned along the way too to hire out what you're not good at or what you don't like doing, and you'll go a lot farther that way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. What concerns you?
The funny thing about me talking a bunch about AI is that AI concerns me. And there's so much greatness that can come from it and that already has come from it. It also scares me that it feels so close to being out of control, and that there's, an element to it that I like when I can tell that something has been created by AI. But then I've been duped before by things that I didn't think were created by AI and totally were, and I like to think of myself as someone who can tease that out, and the fact that I can't tell sometimes scares me. So that's what scares me, and there's also too, like, am I scared my job's gonna get taken? Of course. Am I scared that, like, AI is gonna, take over and we're all gonna, before we know it, be completely, like, taken over by robots in the blink of an eye? Sure. But most of it's that I don't it feels a little, like, out of control, and that if I can't detect it, then, like, do we need AI to detect AI? And then you get into this weird meta, kind of thing, and, I think a lot about it, and I have, 0 answers for what the right thing is going forward.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's going to become more and more of a challenge. I don't deny that part of it, right? I mean, it continues to evolve. We've been working on a couple things that mimic clients recently. So, mimic the client's writing style, mimic the client's voice, etc. And you're hard pressed in the end to really sort of decipher when did the client write it versus when did AI, other than if you sort of look for the patterns and the structure. The AI is following the pattern and the structure perfectly, where the human being can vary a lot, right? So that
Totally.
to me is a perfect tell. Otherwise, it's a little harder to call it out.
It can't, especially when you're rapid fire and just trying to get stuff done. The nuances are, and it's getting better, right? That those nuances that then, you tell AI, make it more human, and then they throw like a mistake in the middle of it. Um, what's funny too is that when I get an email that's written by someone and I notice spelling mistakes or grammatical errors or some nuance in how the person types, I love it. I'm like, "Oh, wow, this person actually wrote this email." Um, and then I'm like, "Why would you spend time writing that like, I'm so conflicted about what the right, way to approach all of this is, and, it's also scary too because work gets done a lot faster, and you're gonna get left behind so much faster if you don't, at least embrace it to some degree.
Absolutely. Last question, what excites you?
What excites me? AI. No, I'm just kidding. It's the answer for everything. Um, there's really cool things happening specifically in diabetes research, and this isn't there's a few of these different products, but the replacement of pancreas cells and with cells that function properly that essentially cure diabetes and that allow patients to manage their blood sugar on their own. And those kind of technologies, that's really just one example, are so cool to me. And the permanence of those, I think, is going to change the healthcare landscape because it's not, you know, a monthly prescription that you need. It's not going into the doctor every couple of months, which right now is a big money, or revenue generator for the industry. So those kind of therapies that are, right now there's a little bit of a halt in the funding of them because they are so novel, though they are coming out and data is, pretty good on some of them and super exciting. So those kind of technologies and how they're going to change the healthcare industry as a whole, I find really exciting. And in terms of patient recruitment, the it's really hard to recruit patients for those kind of studies where there's permanent changes. And a lot of that is because you're permanently altering your body, but also because it's not normal yet. So I'm very excited to see where those go and where healthcare is going to land as these more permanent changes become available for very common conditions like type 1 diabetes and different cancers. And there's just really cool research happening right now.
Absolutely. And I mean, I look forward to not just the personalized side of that, but also just the like you said, the permanence, for
Yeah,
sure is exciting. So
so
thank you.
cool.
Thank you for sharing that. And Victoria Donovan, thank you so much for being here on the Life Science Success Podcast, for sharing with us your story and also the story of Clinically Media. And I wish you success.
Been an absolute pleasure. Thank you, Don.
Thanks a lot.